What's up, you guys? Welcome to The Imagination. I'm your host, Emma, and today I'm absolutely honored to introduce you all to MK Ultra, Monarch, and Secret Space Program survivor, overcomer, and whistleblower, remote viewer, psychic medium, published writer and author, blogger, podcaster and content creator, fearless educator, spiritual ability, and astral realm warrior, and my new friend, Olivia James, aka Gray Mouse. A little bit about Olivia's incredible story and what we will be discussing today. Olivia emerged from a past of unimaginable trials, her life a testament to the indomitable human spirit. Born into a world shadowed by her family's ties to drug trafficking, Olivia's early years were marred by betrayal and manipulation. Her father, once a figure in military intelligence, who later entwined himself with cartels, made a harrowing choice to sign Olivia over to clandestine governmental mind control programs to escape his own imprisonment. At the tender age of 7, Olivia was thrust into the cold grip of a psychiatric hospital where she endured the horrors of MK Ultra trauma-based mind control and Monarch programming. Under the weight of LSD, electroshock, relentless hypnosis, her mind was dissociated and fractured to create distinct identities crafted for covert missions on Earth and beyond. Her journey led her to the enigmatic Dr. Green and Project Traveler, an occult program steeped in possession and trance. There, Olivia's consciousness was stretched across lifetimes, unearthing memories of past existences as a dark entity, a serial killer, a medium, and even a slave. As a spirit host, Olivia became a vessel for elite families seeking communion with deities and spirits, navigating a world where the veil between realms was treacherously thin. Despite the chaos of her upbringing in inner city schools, Olivia's brilliance shone through in academic programs, even as her mind grappled with adult thoughts far beyond her years. The abuse ceased only when she was fully molded for the purposes of the program, trained in personality profiling, beta operations, assassinations, and even corporate espionage. At age 19, she was conscripted into the secret space program, serving in the corporate sector on Mars until the age of 39. Her father, now passed, took his secrets to the grave, while her mother claims a fog of forgotten years. In 2018, a spark ignited within Olivia as she stepped into a corporate human resources role eerily reminiscent of her work in the secret space program. Memories, long buried under layers of programming, flooded back with relentless clarity. Determined to reclaim her truth, she journeyed on a path of healing through hypnotic regression, meditation, and remote viewing. In this sacred work, Olivia rediscovered her psychic and psionic abilities, embracing her role as a spirit host who allows beings to speak through her in acts of voluntary possession. Driven by her father's words to burn the system down after he passed, Olivia resolved to expose the hidden and occulted mechanisms that shape the duality of her life. Today, Olivia James stands as a warrior of disclosure, using her abilities to infiltrate bases and extract secrets through remote viewing and spirit hosting. Her discoveries have unveiled Project Oblivion, a sinister plot targeting the disclosure community, and she shares these truths fearlessly. A gifted writer of 2 published books, Gray Mouse, Sex, Space, and Mind Control, and Gray Mouse, Purgatory, she also details her experiences into 2 blogs and on social media where her short videos ignite hope and awareness. Traversing outer realms with unwavering courage, Olivia declares that fear is the only true shackle, and by releasing it, humanity can break free. Olivia's mission is nothing less than world-changing. With every memory reclaimed, every secret exposed, she lights a path for others to heal and rise. Her words and visions ripple across the globe, awakening hearts to their own power and potential. As she fearlessly unveils hidden truths, Olivia ignites a revolution of love and unity, inviting us all to rise, to reclaim our light, and to co-create a world where freedom reigns supreme. Her testimony is a call to action and a bold reminder that resilience and truth will always be the antithesis to darkness and the light that can reshape the cosmos. Before wrapping up the introduction of today's guest, I'd love to share just a couple quick reminders and updates. If you'd like to be a guest on the show or share any information privately with me, you can reach out via email at imagineabetterworld2020@gmail.com or standbysurvivors@protonmail.com. Additionally, I've teamed up with a couple of my favorite brands to offer you exclusive discount codes on products I love, including Rife Technology frequency machines and CZTL's premium methylene blue. You can find all the relevant links and codes along with other resources down below in the show notes. Your support across all platforms is greatly appreciated, especially as I've had to shift to alternative streaming platforms such as Rumble and X following the termination of my former YouTube channel. I've just recently started a new YouTube channel, and you can subscribe to me there at the handle at Imagination Podcast Official. I will be rebuilding this platform as well. This transition to multiple platforms is crucial to continue to be able to share vital information to the public and disclosure community. Thank you all wholeheartedly for helping to make the imagination the safest space on the internet for survivor, whistleblower, advocate, and educator disclosures. Your support means the absolute world to me. So you guys, without further ado, please help me in welcoming today's guest of honor, survivor, whistleblower, voice for the voiceless, disclosure, and anti-child abuse advocate, walking miracle, brilliant wordsmith, and a woman on a mission to expose and burn down what's been hidden in the dark so that we can end child and human slavery once and for all. The one, the only, Olivia James, Gray Mouse. Olivia, thank you so much for being here today with us. What an honor it is to have you on.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. I've listened to a lot of your content leading up to this interview, and I am just blown away by your story. And I know that we're not going to get to all of it today. And I'm really excited that you agreed already to come on more than once. Just a little teaser for people listening. But I really want to spend today getting to know you a little bit and some foundations
Okay.
of, you getting into these programs and about your background. So let's go back in time. And let's talk a
Yes.
little bit about your family history and sort of what set you up to, be involved in these programs by the time the generational cycle got down to you.
Okay. So I always start with, a story about my parents, and I always say I had interesting parents. And I actually want to bless the podcast by giving a quote from my father from the spirit realm. I'm actually closer to him now that he's passed than when I was alive. But he gave me this very clear message, and he wanted me to tell the world. He told me specifically as his daughter, he told me to burn it down. He said, burn the system down. He said, go out there and tell everyone what they did and what they made us do. So from my father, there's the message that we need to continue in our heavy disclosure. So I wanted to start by saying I had interesting parents all the way back. My father, he started off, he was recruited very, very young at about 18 years old from a very small town, Midwest town, for military intelligence. And I can only imagine he probably tested, through the roof on certain things. He actually spoke German and he learned German in about 6 months. He ended up being stationed in the Russian-German border where he was a code breaker and he got into military intelligence for the army, so the ASA. So he did that for a time. And when he came out of there, um, I think he felt a little bit lost from what he's told me. His spirit has told me he felt a little bit lost and he ended up getting connected to some kind of nefarious characters, I guess, but who's to say because he was there too, so he was probably involved in that too. And we call them cartels now, but back when he was involved with them, I don't believe they had the name cartels. I think they considered them like crime syndicates, something like that. So he started working for the cartels and very heavy major drug trafficking. He was trafficking large amounts of heroin into the country for them. And he very talented, I suppose, from what he was doing. Like he would do it by boat, by bus, by car, and he was a pilot also, so he could fly a plane. So they were making so much money. He ended up meeting my mother. She was very young, 18, 19 years old. And she ended up being a part of work on trafficking on the bus because she told me she would go back and forth on the bus with heroin strapped to her stomach. And she said they sometimes, if they got pulled over, nothing would ever happen to her. And people can research this, that there was, you know, I think a lot of people know that there was a lot of government involvement in early forms of drug trafficking. You can research it, you can look it up. There was also some agreements made with border control and things like that back in the 60s and 70s for them to ensure that they got back and forth across the border. So they were making a lot of money. They were doing, big things at this age, you know. And I think I was a baby at the time. But what started to go wrong was that my father became addicted to his own product. And that wasn't good because he was starting to miss drops. He was missing those meetings, those connections that became very important to their trafficking network that they made. So they tried to scare him a little bit. They did one raid of his home and, pretty much nothing came of it. They kind of wanted to scare him straight, like try to get himself together to continue doing the work. And if anybody knows anything about addiction, that would have been very difficult to just overnight stop that because he was addicted to heroin. Um, so he kept on and there was a lot of things going on in those days, a lot of danger. I know there was some kind of like assassination attempts on him because he told me that it's because, people just wanted what he had. He was starting to become like this known figure and, he had all this money and people just wanted to take it. He said that's where a lot of the danger came from in those days. They wanted to take things from him. And he didn't get himself together, so they ended up doing a second raid. And the second raid is one where he got arrested. And I know they smashed their car through the front gate, tore everything down, burst through the door. And it was him and my mother alone in the house. And right when they burst through the front door, he yelled it to her in Spanish to go and, dump everything they had. And so he stayed in the front of the house being, beaten up by them. And she had a chance to, you know, flush as much as she could. But he ended up getting arrested. There was this huge public trial in a very small town. It was like and back in those days, it was ended up being in the newspapers and they would draw pictures of him in, these big, huge public trials. He had like this fancy lawyer and everything with the money he had. And it was looking like he was in prison for life. That was just what it is. They had so much evidence against him. There was no point, he was going to prison for life. And this went on for a while, and towards the end of the trial, just at the end, all they said was they had the wrong person and they let him go, the wrong name. They let him go, and then they gave him a local government job. So they hired a known drug trafficker and heroin addict as a local government worker, even after all this huge public trial. So that was very interesting. And so with my psychic abilities, I'm able to do something called spirit hosting, which is I allow beings from other realms, and it could be anything from an alien, an entity, spirits, discarnates, um, especially with my father, I'm able to speak with him more regularly now. And he's actually given me a lot of information about what happened to him during that time period. And he told me in order to save himself, he had to give something up, and he gave me up. He gave me up to them. He signed and allowed me to be used by them. And his spirit kind of understands that that wasn't the appropriate thing to do, but he says when he was alive, he was very narcissistic and very selfish, and he kind of wanted to, keep himself safe. And in a way, he kind of thought that he saved everyone else by just sacrificing one because of all the children. If there was only one that it was happening to, then he would be okay. And he kind of said that he didn't know everything. He said that when sometimes I would come home from wherever they sent me and that I would look normal. I would talk normal. I didn't say anything. And I never talked as a child. I barely ever talked. So how would he know? He wouldn't know anyway, and that he couldn't tell there was anything wrong with me because, they had pushed it so far deep. I had pushed it so far deep, he couldn't tell, what was wrong with me. And even as I grew to be older, you know, teenager, and even into, adulthood, he was very um disconnected from me. He didn't want to be around me, and I kind of asked him, even in his spirit language, what was that about? And he just said he couldn't he thought I was a disgusting thing from what they did to me in MK Ultra. He just couldn't look at me. He said it was disgusting what I was and what I'd become. In his mind, he thought I was just a ruined child, a ruined girl, a ruined person because of what they made me do. And I appreciated that. I appreciated the way he spoke to me because when he did come through and speak through me, he gave it to me as a gift. He spoke in his earth language, the way he was when he was here on Earth, because he said he couldn't do it if, because where he is now, all he feels is love, he said. I can't talk like that. But he said, I give you this gift and I talk in my human voice. And that's when he said, the reason why I couldn't be around you, I couldn't look at you because I thought you were disgusting. Look at the way you live, look at the way your mother lives. That's kind of the way he talked. Like he really did just didn't want to be around me because he thought I was disgusting. And that's, I think, a lot of us people that have been in MK Ultra or some kind of trauma or some abuse in general have that guilt and shame that, and then feeling like these people look at us like we're dirty and ruined. And, that's something that we're all going to have to deal with, in terms of how other people feel about us.
Do you know
So
by chance
that, ha
what they had told
yes,
your father that you would be involved in? Did they tell him anything or like give a cover story of what they were going to use you for? Because it sounds like he didn't know what was actually going on.
he told me. No, he said he only knew a few things and he said he wasn't allowed to ask questions. He said you do not ask the government questions when you're in this type of position. He said a question is death. You want to ask a question, or you want to die? Which one do you want? And he said he didn't ask. He knew, and in a way I feel like he was trauma trained too, because he knew he couldn't ask questions, especially being in the military. You don't just ask questions. That's not a normal thing. You just can't ask questions like that, like take liberties and just say, I need to know this. He knew that it was, especially when they saved him from life in prison, he didn't feel like he had, the strength to just say, hey, what are you doing? No, he would send me out the door. So when I really got taken into MK Ultra, and that was the plan they had for me, is to, take me into, and I really don't talk about this often, but I did have my own father take me to, it would look like, I really don't say this too much. It's just because it's such a weird memory, I guess. And I remember he took me to kind of like a psychiatrist's office once, and which is weird because he never took me to appointments. It was, or to school activities, anything like that. It was always my mom. So he took me by himself. And I asked my mom if she remembers me having this appointment. She said she didn't know. She never even knew about it. She didn't know what it was. So my father told me that I was going to be tested for a special school. So he took me to this like psychiatrist's office. And when I went there, nothing, I don't remember being harmed in any way, but I remember it was just an older gentleman with, he was writing notes and he just had me sit on like a little carpet and he put all these little blocks in front of me and just wanting me to work on these little puzzles. And he was just observing me. And I didn't talk. I didn't, I wasn't writing anything. I wasn't doing anything. He was observing me do little puzzles. And I never went to any special school after that or anything like that. And we just left and my dad didn't say anything about it. He didn't talk about it after that. And it's just such a strange memory I was like, I never went to any special school. So it may have, and it may have been part of it. I'm not quite sure. That's just something that I remember being observed doing puzzles in real time. I remember that, exactly it happening. I remember what the gentleman looked like. So it must have been seared in my memory somewhere. So I got taken to a psychiatric hospital around age 7. And sometimes people ask me, do my parents remember me going anywhere? I don't really know. And I don't know how I could be gone for 6 months and they not say anything. But I did ask my mom, and this was a few years ago, if she ever remembered me leaving or going anywhere when I was a child. All she said is it was possible. She doesn't remember. She said it's possible and that she doesn't remember anything, which I'm not quite sure what happened to her, if she got affected by some type of mind control or something. I'm not quite sure. I don't really delve too deep in it. She doesn't know, a lot about it, even though she was involved in it. She just doesn't know. So I got taken to the psych hospital, and it's on the East Coast. I really don't usually say the name, but if people wanted to research it, it wouldn't be hard to find because it's no longer open. It was a huge facility on the East Coast that was kind of like a self-sustaining place. They had their own gardens, they had their own crops, they had underground tunnels, a huge place. So when I pulled up there, they had taken me in a van, and when I got out of it, I saw that there were some long steps. And as soon as I started walking up, the main handler, a psychiatrist, came out. And it was a woman. This is really strange because I know people usually think of like men as being the perpetrators of this. But the handler that I saw in the programmer, the main programmer, was a woman, an older woman. She was a psychiatrist. And I always talk about this because it's seared in my memory. The way she looked, it was just I hadn't grown up with people like that. I grew up, my parents were drug traffickers. So to see her, she always wore these beautiful pantsuits, like flowy pantsuits. And I always remember seeing her in a white satin pantsuit, kind of like 70s style. And she had because this was in the 70s, and she had her hair pinned back very, gently. She looked ethereal to me. Something about her was just, you know, the energy she had is just something about her. I always remembered it. Um, and so they were doing some interesting things at this particular program. And it was a very small program. They had it in like one of their small, back sections of their buildings. That the buildings weren't all connected. There were some that were kind of like in the far back, and there was one there, and it almost looked like a children's wing because there was a playroom there, and we had a couple of rooms there. And it was just the weirdest thing is just me and one other boy. His name was Jacob. Two children. That's it. So I'm thinking it was a specialized program because especially if there's only two children, they had to be pretty sure that it would work, just to have two there. That's a very small sample size if they're doing experimentation. Um, so from what I know, they were trying to reach a goal. One of the goals they wanted to reach was something called syncopated dissociation. So they wanted me and this child to see if we could dissociate at the same time and observe kind of what the effects were, what kind of measurements could be taken of the body systems after some of this, had been done. So they were using systematic abuse and torture, which meant that even in the playroom, even in some of the other areas, they were ensuring that the activities would be changing probably every 15 to 20 minutes, a systematic way. So we learned to anticipate the abuse, what type of abuse, and it was sexual, emotional, physical, psychological, even astral in a way, in my opinion, spiritual abuse in a way. So they were changing the activities, and the psychiatrist, she had two, what we used to call orderlies. They were males, and they kind of wore like the hospital gear. They were her main assistants. So they were the ones that were doing the physical and sexual torture. She didn't do too much of that. In her office, she would conduct some of the chemical experiments, like they used LSD, we did electroshock therapy, and heavy, heavy hypnosis. And that's where she found kind of like her major results from her program, where she found everything is from these experiments in hypnosis in her office. And there was one time I remember she taught us so well that me and Jacob, we would sit together and she would put an acupuncture needle in the middle of our palm. And as soon as you do that, you were you were thrown into trance. It was the easiest way to find your way into trance is just a needle in the palm. We put our hands up on the chair. She put a acupuncture needle in the middle of our palm and we'd go into trance. We wouldn't even be there anymore. We were successful in so many ways. She ended up calling us like prized pupils. We were like perfect assets. She was very excited about the things that she found during hypnosis and, all the other activities. There were so many different things that were used. They were trying to make us eat sandwiches with filth in them. And if you tried to say no, they would, physically hurt you in different ways. They used a lot of slapping and a lot of punching in the stomach, things like that. Something that wasn't going to leave an obvious bruise on the face. And it was really interesting how they did that. But what they said is that they were doing it so systematically and so often and so much. Me and this other child, we became so acclimated to it. Like we didn't cry anymore. We didn't ask for food. We didn't ask for water. We didn't ask to use the bathroom. We didn't ask for comfort, like a normal child would when they're hurt. There was nothing that came out of us anymore. It was like they had broken us down so much. They made us into like empty shells and they were trying to build it back up. There was so much complexity though in the mind that they didn't know what was going on while we were being harmed. Me and Jacob, we had learned to speak to each other without words because they wouldn't let us speak to each other. They made a, there was no talking, no nothing, and they wouldn't speak to us very often. They would just, hurt us. So it was really interesting that they thought there was only, the pain and the effects of the pain and trauma happening to us, but we were changing on the inside just because of us two being connected, almost like trauma twinning. So we were learning to speak to each other without words. And I remember we were both being electroshocked at the same time because they were trying to reach that syncopated dissociation. And I remember this was so cool to see Jacob. He left his body and I saw him playing in the room. And I wanted to play too, so I needed to leave my body. And I realized that that was probably the only time that me and him could be children and act like children is when we were able to leave the pain of the body. And we would rush to leave the body. As soon as we would start to feel pain, we got to that point where we're out and we could just play each other, run around and play tag and things like that and be little kids. There was so many bad things that happened to the playroom that it's all like when I think about the playroom, and it leaves that like kind of like slimy feeling when I think about it. There was so many things that they did to us there. And I think the program lasted around 6 months before we were considered to be, perfect. That what they wanted. We did everything they wanted. We took the abuse, we took to the trauma, they said, and we had given the results they wanted. And I know they found more than what they talked about because she ended up doing referral out. She did a referral for me to some other special sector. So she had me taken to another looked like a psychiatrist's office because it was very a lot of neutral furniture. It didn't look like that clean hospital look. So I considered it more like a psychiatric hospital. But when I got there, there was an elderly gentleman there, and he looked very frail. By the time I saw him, he was very thin, frail. He wore these little tiny wire rim glasses. He was very much all bald on the top, and he had these two people. I think there was two people in the room, and they were kind of like I think they had like an albino condition. I'm not sure if they're related, but I considered them to be related because they looked almost the same. But he called himself Dr. Green, and I'm not quite sure, but I know a lot of people say that Dr. Green is another word for Mangala. So by the time I saw him, he was very old, and he looked very, I don't know, he didn't look scary because of his physical presence was so deteriorated by that time. He was probably like 90 or something. And I wasn't afraid of him physically, but his energy was so scary. It was real. I felt nervous just being around him. And I'm still a kid. I'm 7. So I just felt, have you ever had that feeling like nervous that somebody's going to spank you or something? I always had that like weird feeling around him. Like he didn't hurt me. He didn't say anything harm, but his energy was like that. And I never really said this before, but I actually saw him at my house one time. He actually came to the back door of my house and talked to my dad. And I don't know what was said. I just remember seeing him once when I was very young. He came to the back door. So that was kind of like validation for me. Like I remembered seeing him at the back door of my house. So when I went to the so I met Dr. Green's office, and he instructs these two individuals, I think the brother and sister. He tells them to do kind of like an examination or an assessment of me, and they kind of are ready to, and they kind of hold hands, and they're kind of like surrounding me, and they start doing these weird little things to me, like they're looking me over, looking in my eyes, almost like a medical exam, look at my ears and things like that. And they had me open up my mouth and say ah, and at that time they turned to him and they said, we see it, we see the thing inside her. So that's when I was taken into a program called Project Traveler because they thought that they saw something inside me, and they thought I was possessed. They thought I had an entity attachment, but they were wrong. They didn't know that that was just something that was me inside my cellular level. It was still remaining from a past life. So they started a program where they were trying to connect and kind of trying to either control or remove some of these attachments to see what the effect was. Could they control this thing? Could they, get information from this thing? And, there's so many different avenues they could have taken with this. So they had me ready for Project Traveler, and that's kind of like an occult program, paranormal kind of training program that like seeing things like that. So when I went back to the psychiatric hospital after I saw Dr. Green, they did a few experiments. I remember one was they wanted me, because of hypnosis, I'm able to become something of like an open portal or open gateway. And I can allow something else to step in while I take a very soft step back. And I feel very comfortable when it happens. I'm very relaxed, almost like I'm taking a rest. So they saw that during hypnosis, I was able to do that even as a child. And they wanted to use that. They wanted to see what could happen. It was something new for them that they hadn't been able to measure scientifically, and that was part of what they wanted to do is measurement the effect of it. So they had me in sensory deprivation, which when I did it, it wasn't water or anything like that. They just had me sit in this dark room in a wooden chair by myself, and they had a blindfold on my eyes, so I couldn't see anything ever. And nobody would speak to me. They didn't give me any food. They hooked me up to an IV just so I could have that liquid, you know, but nobody spoke to me, and they had me do spirit hosting. And it went on for like days. The spirits never left the inside of me. So I thought it was really weird, and I felt very conflicted. I know I felt very conflicted because these different entities were coming through me and they were speaking, and the people were recording the information and talking and everything. I'm supposed to be afraid of and hate entities, but they're the ones who kept me alive during this. They were sustaining me with their own energy because I wasn't being fed or anything. I was in a lot of pain, and the entities are what sustained me. But it's just conflicting because I'm supposed to be afraid of them when they're protecting me. And then it was the humans that were abusing me and torturing me. And then these entities were protecting me. It was very conflicting, and I had a really hard time with that for a while. Like I can't, what do I do? These people are protecting me, but these other ones that I'm supposed to be close with are not. So they were getting different measurements, electrical output, things like that. Then they just test you, like, they do basic medical measurements, blood pressure, and they check your heart and things like that. So it was very basic, and it was in the new stages when they were developing this in the 70s, trying to figure out how they can make it work for them. And they did. They expanded it quite a bit to
Were
where
there
it's now in
other
a catalog.
children in there with you in this program and Project Traveler, or were you alone in that one?
I've never met anybody else that was in it, but I know for a fact there probably had to been because I saw them as adults. I didn't see them as children, but I met some of them as adults when
Seems
we were
like you
doing
were you were
jobs
sort
together.
of used for these kind of obscure gifts that not a lot of people have. It seems like a lot of
Yes.
the things that you were involved in, and I know we'll talk about other projects where, the secret space program and stuff where there might have been a little bit more people involved with that, but it seems like you and the people that you were around had these very selective gifts versus being in like a big program with hundreds of kids that, you
Yeah.
hear about sometimes.
Yeah. And I think, in my opinion, it was a result of what they found during hypnosis. That's what I feel. And that's what my higher self has kind of expressed to me is why I was doing that is because with hypnosis, it was a huge discovery that they saw that I could interact with my past lives and become it in this world. Like if I go under trance, I don't just talk about my past life. The person that I was in that life comes through and speaks. So it's actually letting that thing come to life and speak and step into the world. So they were able to discover that that was a thing. And, I'm not the first person to do that. There's a lot of different cultures around the world that actually practice this in their spiritual beliefs. And it's called they call it like letting the spirit ride you. I don't think they kind of delve into some of the darker aspects like I was, put in, but it's not a new theory. People have done it for thousands of years. It's just something that kind of people fear. And I think these people kind of took it pretty far where they were able to privatize it in a way. They did privatize this. So they have it in a catalog. Spirit hosting is in a catalog that they offer to people, for quite a bit of money. So if somebody wanted to have a spirit host in their house, for a weekend, they do that. That's easy to do that. Very easy. Because for me, if I could do it and like if I'm in that mode, I could probably do it within a count of 10, which that's pretty significant. Oh, you can bring a demon here in 10 seconds? Kinda, yeah. I hate to say that, but kinda. Kinda. Yeah. But this was all the way from back when I was a child and what they found during hypnosis. So I kind of want to find, because I know what they found during hypnosis, so I wanted to kind of describe those past lives, and then it can kind of give a little understanding as to why they would want to use this.
Before you go
And
into that, could you,
yes,
sorry.
go ahead.
I was gonna say, would you be able to, I know people, this is kind of new, I think, for a lot of people hearing spirit hosting. What's the difference between that and
Yes.
what people are more familiar with, which is, say, a possession?
Well, I consider this a voluntary possession. I consider spirit hosting, and actually, a demon taught me the word hosting. They told me that. That's where I got it from. They said what you are is called a host. You are hosting. So that's how I got the term is from an actual demon. He told me that I'm a spirit host. So that's how the term stuck with me is because somebody from the dark realm told me I'm a spirit host. So that's where it came from. From if anybody wanted to know, it came from a demonic. He told me that I was a spirit host. And it's a little bit, to me, it's a little bit, I'm not a channeler. I don't consider myself a channeler. I do call myself a spirit host because when I go into trance, I definitely go so deep that the person possess the thing or person or even an animal. I've done it with animals before. I've talked to animals, let animals speak to me before. And I push myself way far deep down into a different dimension and then I let whatever wants to speak, they take over my body. So they're in my arms, they're in my legs, they're taking over, they're speaking through my mouth, they're seeing through my eyes. Our minds are kind of melded completely. So it's like when they're inside me, I can see in their minds and what they're doing and it's really interesting to be able to look inside their head. And sometimes can see pictures, sometimes I see like almost like jelly and it's so different. Every single thing that I've ever done this with, it's always a different experience and it's a different feeling. What I thought was really interesting though, and this one might blow people's mind, is because it's not just demonics that I host. Like I said, I host like spirits and things like that. And I wanted to test myself. So I let myself, I'm not a religious person. I consider myself spiritual, but I just wanted to see what I can do. And I let quite a few religious figures speak through me and what I thought was interesting is that it felt the same as when somebody from the dark realm took over. The feeling was the same. I didn't have like that. It was I thought there was going to be something different, like maybe light or, rainbows no, it felt exactly the same. For me, I was like, whoa, are we all from the same place? It felt the same. So it was really interesting.
Wow. It almost seems like you're able to control what happens and have sort of like a co-conscious like rapport with what inhabits your body versus where you hear about a lot of people and their alleged like demonic possessions. It seems like any control
Yes.
over the thing that inhabits them is gone. This thing will, run their body. They're taking a way backseat to it, where it seems like you're both riding in the front seat kind of together and
hmm
able to manage that relationship and the conversation almost like how we are now.
Yeah, and I think it's different because sometimes they like another demonic will want to possess a human, and they don't consider me human. They consider me one of them. So why would they, fully possess me when I am one of them? I'm the same frequency of them. They feel in their minds, they feel that the dark realm feels that, and some of these entities and lower gods, elder gods, I call them. So the people that are doing getting possessed, from what I know when I was one of those that we waited for them to allow it. It's definitely you have to allow it. In my opinion, from what I've seen, it wasn't forced upon the human. The human in some way had an opening, and that's how we got in. I could talk about the little more about my experience, so that might make it more sense before I'm talking about that.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I wanted to talk about some of the past lives that they found in the psychiatric hospital with the programmer. So the first life that I want to talk about is where I was in Italy. It was about the 1400s. And in those days, I probably would have been called, I don't know, they might have called me a witch, but I know I was a medium because I lived in a small village and I had two young children. My husband had passed away, so I was a widow. And I thought I was helping people. People would come to me and we would barter. They'd bring me vegetables and fish and things like that. They would trade me, and I would be a medium and I would let them speak to lost loved ones and things like that. And so I thought I was helping people. I didn't know I was doing anything wrong. And just one day, the word spread, people were coming to me more often, and the word spread to far. And men came to our village and they came to my house and they punched me in the face. They beat me up kind of and dragged me on a wagon and they dragged me to a dungeon. And my uncle had to take my kids with him. And they just tortured me and they hung me from the ceiling by my arms. And they just wanted me to admit that I was working with the devil. And I wouldn't because it was true. I wasn't working with anybody. I was just trying to help people see their loved ones and things like that. I would never admit it. And I was so angry. And they took it really far, and I ended up dying in that life, but I didn't die from being burned to the stake or anything. I died from starvation and dehydration. And one of the things I remember, and I haven't said this before in an interview, is that those two children, my uncle brought them one time to see me, and there was like a small hole in, like almost like a baby window where they could look in, and they saw me hanging from the ceiling, and I was naked and everything. And I'm like, I can't imagine what they felt. And I never said this before, but one of those kids in that life, he was my father in this life. So we had unfinished business. Yeah, we had unfinished business from some type of, you know, hundreds of year of trauma that we experienced together. When he saw me, hanging from a ceiling naked, being tortured as a witch, imagine, in his little mind what happened. And so I don't, maybe we decided to come back together to resolve some of those issues. And they still didn't get resolved, but, maybe next time. But it was just, I never said that before, that one of the kids was my father in this life. But I remember being very angry at men in that life, and it lingered in me for a long time. And they used that. They used everything they found. Anything I said in those hypnosis sessions with them as a child, they said, and imagine I'm being 7 and I'm talking about this stuff. I'm only 7, but the inside of me is ancient. So I go to a different place and I'm talking just like them. That was one of the lives that I remembered. And there was another life where I think it was late 1700s, early 1800s, something like that. And I was a male and I had been living on my own for so long. I had lost my parents really young. And so I was kind of like a street kid, a street urchin or something like that. But I had made my way for a long time. I survived it and I went through to adulthood and I was traveling around. I went from village to village looking for work, looking for food, things like that. But there was definitely something wrong with me. I had something inside me that just had a different type of hunger. And I ended up meeting another gentleman and we became friends and he was like me. And we traveled together and we wanted the same things. We had that same hunger. So what we were is me and him together were kind of like we would assault women. So we were going from village to village assaulting women and, you know, pushing them to their end. I don't want to say the whole thing, but you know what I mean. You get my drift. We were pushing them to their end. And we thought we could never be caught because we traveled so much, we didn't think they could catch us. In those days, it's not like there's the internet or GPS. They couldn't find us. But we got careless and sloppy, and we went to one village and we ended up assaulting somebody and left her in a field. They found her. They found her right away. And we were at a local pub drinking with the local villagers, and they absolutely knew it was us because we were the only new people in the village. This had never happened before. They knew it was us. They chased us. We ran, and we thought we were safe. We hid in a barn, and we weren't. They found us, and they instead of pulling us out, they locked us in and burned the barn down. And I remember that the last thing I remember from that life is I was trying to climb up and go up into the rafters to escape the flames. But we ended up dying like a painful death, and we deserved it, rightfully so. Rightfully so, we deserved it. There was just something I had chosen in that life, probably to be a victimizer or something. And I don't know, we deserved the end though. And so that was another life they saw that could be used, for their purposes. And I thought that was a really interesting thing for them to say that, we can use this. If that was inside, because they think, or a lot of people think, I don't want to say that. I even think too that sometimes these things linger in you because you can remember them, what if they triggered something in you with MK Ultra with the code, they could use it. They could train you for that. They could build up altars for that, just because it was in you before, they think that they can use it. But I just wanted to say, out of everything they thought, that's the one thing they were wrong about. They thought that they could predict who I would be, and they could never have been more wrong about it because I'm not anything like what they wanted me to be. I've come so far from that and been something different. So whatever they thought about who I was completely wrong. So there was one more life that where I was, I believe, a slave. I was a male, and it looked like ancient times, Egypt maybe, and there was these large pyramids and we were all building, we were walking around, me and every other person, every other citizen in this land we were all walking. Imagine seeing thousands of people walking at the same time, and we would all just pass each other. We were carrying dirt and and sand. Nobody talked to each other. Nobody was eating. Nobody was drinking, nothing. And if I looked really far, if I could look on the top of a pyramid, there was this huge being standing there and he had a staff. And he looked, I swear, I called them the dog people, but he looked like, if you ever saw like a statue of Anubis, he kind of looked like that. So and he was so strong. Imagine one of those beings could control thousands of people. That's how strong that race of beings was. They could control thousands with just one person. And I think it had something to do with the staff. I'm not quite sure. But that's all we did with move sand. That was our whole life. And I was a slave and I ended up dying on the steps from dehydration. Just done. We worked ourselves to death. And you would just die and you would fall down wherever you died and that would be it. Nobody would move you or anything. And that's how they were working so quickly, though. They were trying to have us build something called a flash portal. And it was something that they were going to be using. And they even made a law against it, saying that we couldn't use it. And I think if we could use it, they know how advanced we become. But I remember one of the things that I said when I was talking is that our people believed that the dog people came down and killed our God, and that our God was a crocodile, and that the dog people had came down and killed him, and that's how they got to take over. So it was really interesting to say that, like, it's really weird. Like, we thought that a crocodile was our god, and then this dog person come and take over. So that was really weird. But this thing was so strong. So when I was under trance, this was like one of the very first times I ever went under hypnosis, and I went so deep and so long that I didn't realize that this was one of the first times I realized that I was at the place. There was no limits to the time period. There was no, you leave the physical limits of your body behind, you can go anywhere, you can do anything. You can go to that time period. And I didn't know that I was doing that. I was actually there interacting with the scene. And when I realized it is because I almost like saw like a cloud bubble moving open through my mind, and the dog man was there. And all he said was, get back to work. And, imagine like this huge being, you thought they were going to have some really cool speech. He says, he pulls open this smoke bubble and he said, get back to work. Where he saw me laying in my bed, he said that. So I'm like, that was a big realization for me. Like, I'm doing something way beyond that I'm supposed to be able to do. I don't know how I'm doing this. So that was one of the weirdest experiences, is to see that he was interacting with me. And I did do a body scan of him. Like, I used my abilities and my higher self to look inside of his body. And when I looked in the inside of him, even though this dude was huge, in the middle of his stomach, like by his solar plexus, he's a host. He's not even controlling himself. There was like a jumble of black worms inside of him. So it was like an alien species that was using him as a host. So the dog people weren't even the brains of the operation. It was these worms. This sentient blob of intelligent worms were inside him, and they were instructing him. So these people, the dog people, weren't even doing this, like the dog man. He was not even the one doing it. It was these worms. It was really interesting to see that, because there's so many myths and legends around the dog men and the dog people, and they're being controlled by another race. So there was one other life to me, this was like one of the most important ones, because it told me so much and gave me so much freedom when I saw this, like about who I was and about how we see light and dark and how we see balance in the world. So I can remember seeing myself in ancient times. And like I said, when I'm doing hosting, I can interact with the scene, and you can get inside the body of the person in that scene and walk with them. So I remember being behind this gentleman, and he was tending to his sheep, out in the late desert, whatever. And he was trying to bring one of his sheep back. And it was getting late and he was getting nervous. And, in those times they had so much mythology about the dark and the darkness. You want to get home before it creeps up towards you. Everybody wanted to get home. So he was already scared. And I found him. He was kind of like my mark, my target. I went there and I found him and I'm like, oh, yes. So, I tried to do silly things and creep up behind him and whisper things in his ears. And he can't see me. I'm invisible. He can't see who I am, but he's terrified. And I just what I call like doing my oppression. I do spiritual oppression. I start just bothering him and following him and scaring him, and I keep doing it. I decided that he's the target, and I wanted to infiltrate his life and take over. So if I ever did that, if I found somebody, that's what I would do. And it all led up to the whole point of me breaking them down so much that they would just let me take over. So, and I couldn't take over unless they let me. So I would continue my oppression c- constantly until they would let me take over. And there was, if anybody ever hears this phrase, even in your dreams, if you ever hear the phrase, let me in, like it's something that's popping in your head, that's an entity. And he's waiting for you to give that affirmation of saying, yeah, yeah, go ahead, come on in. That with you. And I've heard that plenty of times, the words, the exact phrase, let me in. And that's them wanting to take over. And if you say, go ahead, then you just gave them consent to do it. So this, and that's how I used to do it, because in those days I would be called something of a dark jinn. In those days that's how I ate. That's how all my people ate. So we considered ourselves a race of beings, and in the dark realms, they have a strict hierarchy. So you know who deserves respect is based on their ancientness or whatever. They have a hierarchy. So some of the elder gods you would have to show respect to. The jinn, they didn't consider us like some of the hires, but some did. Like even as my name was Harlowin in that life, and a lot of the entities, they always consider themselves gods. I'm not saying I believe they're gods, it's just that's how they speak. They call themselves gods because that's how they were treated in the ancient days. They were worshipped, they were revered. So they considered themselves gods, and they lived for so long doing that it's hard to get you know, that need for status out of their minds. They always hold that. They always consider themselves wanting to be worshipped and things like that. So that's how I was. I lived my life for a long time like that. I was considered myself a trickster god. And I would try to infiltrate their lives and wait for them to, I would just do everything in my power to make their lives miserable. I would make them hurt themselves, other people, destroy their whole lives until they got to the point where they wanted a break and they would let me take over. So that would be the point where saying, just let me in and it'd be over, you know. But that's the manipulation of some of these dark entities. But in in thinking that, Harlan also told me that, and that's me, I'm Harlan. She said that she didn't know she was evil. She had no idea that she was an evil person because she didn't know what evil was. She knows she chose to come here and to take on a role, and she said she played that role to perfection. She came to bring somebody an experience of darkness, and that was her job, and that's what she did. So in her mind, she didn't even know what evil was. She said, I didn't even know. I don't even know what evil is. I thought I was doing something good because I'm trying to help them. They want darkness. I bring it to them. Like why is everyone mad? It's such an interesting way to view things. And in a way I understood what she was saying, but I'm glad she got a chance to see that, some things were harming people. Whether that changes her mind about the experience or not, because she felt, and when I'm talking some of these entities and people and other things, I'm able to talk to so many different parts of people. And you wouldn't know it, but there's so many different parts of a person that you can connect to. A front personality, suppressed memory, you know, a different personality they want you to speak to. There's so many different parts of the heart, the spirit, the soul, the mind, the inner worlds of the mind. There are so many different places to go. So I can't say that one person, I connect to their mind and I got on that's not possible because there's so many different pieces to connect to in a person. It's the most complex thing I've ever seen. Like I actually went inside the mind. You would not believe it, but I saw the Matrix and um it wasn't external. The matrix wasn't external. It was inside the mind of each person because I saw the matrix inside the mind. And there was the lines everywhere going. There were so many secrets and barriers and doors in there. I was like, it was such a big realization. I'm like, the matrix isn't external. It's inside your mind. And that I saw how complex the mind was. So I thought that was really interesting. And it's interesting to see Harlan, think about that. And oh, what I was going to say is that I'm able to connect to so many different parts of these entities. Like you can get down to the base root. And what I saw was they were from the same place as all of us were. We all kind of branched out from a single place. And I don't want to say too much because, I don't want to push it out there as a belief system because that's not the way I think. But it was so interesting to see that something that everybody thinks is so evil had that connection to everyone. They were connected to everyone in a way. So that was a realization for me. So those were kind of some of the lives that kind of got me chosen to be in the programs. And they used all this information to create all the altars. And I have about 118 altars. And my six front altars are the ones that kind of do most of the show running and things like that. I've had a chance to integrate those six front altars, so I don't necessarily speak with their voices anymore. I speak with my original voice now. So that was interesting to get them to go to sleep. So I was going to talk a little bit about the integration. I should talk about that. So I work really well with Misha Johnston. She's pretty well known in our community as a hypnotherapist for SSP and Monarch survivors. And we went deep on this, and I wanted to integrate my alters. So we did heavy work with it. And I let them all speak. I let them tell their stories. But then I got with them and I asked them, I said, the work's done. You've done all the jobs and the missions you were required to do. It's time for you to go to sleep. And even the most rebellious ones, they agreed because in the end, they're all still a part of me. It was within me that was created. No matter what, MK Ultra did, these are still a part of me and these are me. Every single one of the alters was me. And, I have to take responsibility. Even if they've done something, it's because it is still me. So, but they agreed. They agreed to go to sleep for me and go into retirement in a way. With their work being done. And then at that point, when they left, it was such a actually it was really stressful because I had fought my whole life I had fallen back on these different alters to run my life for me to where I didn't have emotion. I didn't feel a lot of pain, emotional pain, things like that. I didn't feel a lot of connections to people. And that's kind of a way to keep yourself safe too, because, that's kind of a major point in the programs. If you're doing mission jobs and work for them, they want you to stay safe and don't talk about the program. So it's kind of like a similar thing as to when you're leading your real life, they don't want you to talk about any of these things. So in a way, it was really strange to have all these altar falls away and to be left with my original self, in which I hadn't known who I was. So it's been like, I don't know, a 6-year process just trying to meet myself and learn about myself and allow myself to have emotions and talk about things pretty openly. And it's been a healing process for me in terms of writing and things like that and getting the information out to people, because I find it was so eye-opening and healing for me. I figured it might be able to trigger somebody else or help somebody else in their experience. So some of the altars that I had, they were used for different things. My six front altars, these ones pretty much did all of the work. Um, the most important one, in my opinion, was probably the Gray Mouse altar, and this one was used for corporate espionage. She did a lot of infiltration work, going into buildings and things like that. There was one, so this was the one mission that I remember distinctly. It was, and it was so scary. I swear, to me, corporate espionage was the hardest and most dangerous work anybody could do. It was always threat of death, no matter what. If there is no perfection, you die. And I knew that. I knew the companies that had contracted me, and I was forced to do this. I didn't have any choice into it. You do the job that you're contracted for because they pretty much own you. You are like, it is like modern day slavery. They own you. If they tell you to do something, you have to do it. There's no chance in saying no. And plus, with all the altars and mind control, it's very difficult. But deep within, we have that inner knowing. But there was one mission I did, and it was me and I think three other girls, and they were all, kind of like similar to me in a way. And the people that were the agency that was in control of us, they wanted us. So just so people know, some of these agency call themselves, they consider themselves enemies of the cabal, but actually a lot of these agencies are not. They're almost like double agents. They're saying that they're helping, and to me, they're not because they threaten to kill me if I don't do something correctly. How are you helping the world if you're threatening to kill me if I'm not doing things properly? It doesn't make any sense to me. And especially some of the companies I worked for, the mercenary companies. I worked for one private military, and it's a private mercenary group, and they are not um nice to their assets. So they allow their female assets to be harmed by other male assets without any repercussions. So that's just one thing about them. And then they consider themselves enemies of the cabal, but then they're allowing their female assets to be harmed by the male ones. It doesn't make sense to me, anyways. So it was me and three other girls. We had to go into this building, a large, huge company. And what's really weird about this company, it's a media company. And when we went in there, we found out that this company is ran by Satanists, and which I think that's really interesting. Yeah, and they're a huge company. Um, so we went in there, they had a server room, there was information in there, and anytime with corporate espionage, they send us in to either change information, steal it, input it, take somebody's computer, switch something out, something like that. And it's really strange because I don't find myself to be particularly good with computers in my real life. So I don't know how I pull that off, but alters can do things that a lot of us don't remember. Like a lot of us have alters that are recorders and that have a photographic memory. So if somebody were to give a code or something and you turn that on, you're constantly recording. And like you wouldn't even know, and it'd be placed so far back in your mind that you would need to be under hypnosis to get debriefed. In that way, though, no one can, if you were to get caught and interrogated, you wouldn't know the information. They could torture you for hours and you would never give out the information of who sent you anything because it's not in your front memory. It's way back deep and they can only get it with hypnosis. So that's a way to keep it safe. The information is kept safe back in the trap of your mind. So we went in this building and we usually we were so good at this. I hated working with other people though. Gray Mouse hates working with other individuals because I can't count on them to do the same things that I do. And I always felt a lot of stress with that because if I saw that somebody else showed emotion on their face, we're already done. The mission's over. If you're not doing everything perfectly, the mission's over. So some of the girls, you cannot, I've seen that. I've seen it happen. I've actually been in missions where the other person showed too much emotion on their face and ruined the whole thing. So they caught us. We had almost gotten in there. And it's so hard to walk. You don't understand how hard it is to go in a secure building with security everywhere and to pretend like you're just a cleaning person and not show any anxiety, stress, pressure, nothing. It's literally you're not even what MK Ultra did to me, I wasn't able to sweat for years. This sounds crazy, but the mind it was so powerful, I couldn't even sweat, especially when anxiety would hit me, I would know that you can't sweat. Because if you sweat, that's a sign that something suspicious, anxiety, something you can't sweat. You can't even show a drop of sweat. So some of these things linger in your body and you don't even know where it comes from. Like I just thought there was something wrong with me. I didn't sweat that much. No, when I have anxiety, I stop sweating because it's a fear. Your mind has that fear. Like, okay, you can't show that pain. You can't show that stress, that anxiety, because then people would be suspicious of you. So we were trying to go in there and pretend that we were like cleaning staff or whatever. And somebody had done something wrong. They knew, and we ended up having to go down a elevator shaft to get out. And I hate doing that kind of stuff because I'm afraid of heights. So we ended up getting out of the building, and the car that was supposed to pick us up was gone because if you're not at the mark at the right time, they're leaving. They're not waiting for you. So I just got out. I left them. I just put my hoodie on and I walked straight through. And it was a really busy area of a big city. So I just started walking as far as I could, and I ended up getting out of there. I don't know what happened to the rest of the girls. I couldn't wait for them. So that was on them, whatever happened to them if they didn't make it back. I don't remember seeing them again, so who knows what happened. But the beta tracker alter, that's kind of interesting because beta work sometimes can be considered like they used to call it like honeypots, things like that. But I consider it's similar to I don't know, similar to Harlow in a way where you infiltrate somebody's life, you find a mark, they give you the mark, the company gives you the mark, the target, you find them, infiltrate your life, and then you become everything they might want, or you become the thing they need, and that thing that makes them feel so comfortable that they can tell you anything. And a lot of it is intel gathering. So I would get into a relationship when they told me, and, basically turn on my recorder, my brain, and record everything. And people become so comfortable around you, they just will tell you anything. And that's how we did get a lot of information. And a lot of that information is used for blackmail and leverage. Whatever information we're obtaining from them from these different jobs, it's blackmail and leverage. I think it's so there's some really high level influencers, male influencers, and they, talk about having all these women around, and like you have no idea that probably a lot of those are, MK Ultra are probably espionage assets trying to gather information on you. They don't even know that. I try to help them and tell them, but they don't know. I'm like, you have no idea. And it's because they would never know. Like if somebody ever met me and saw me, they would have no clue what I was up to. Not in any way they would know, but that's because we were trained to be good at this and that they would never suspect that. That's why, because if people aren't suspecting it, then you're an easy target and they've got everything they need, especially if you're very rich, you're very high influence, and they need information on you, they'll send a woman. They'll send a female asset. And people act like they don't realize this. They think, women are very weak. The things I've seen women do in these programs, they have no idea who we are. They have no idea what we're capable of if they think that we're just weak little girls that cannot do anything. They have no idea. And that's the way the programs want it. They want the world to think that we're just weak little girls and we can't do anything because a lot of these missions are carried out by females. Because sending some large man would be too obvious. Why would you send a large man to do that? They would be caught right away. So they send, small feminine females that have been properly trained to do these jobs. So that's kind of like beta tracking work. Um, when I was, there was one that, this one's kind of, her name's Penelope, and she's a monarch. She's a monarch alter. And she's one that was created at the psychiatric hospital. And I feel really bad for her because she still feels that lingering trauma. But this is what people need to think about Monarch and MK Ultra. They make the Monarch child almost so acclimated to pain that they want it. They seek it, because you've been able to move past it so much. Even in adult life, the mind control programming for that was still going. Some people think that Omega programming is just a self-destruction, like you would hurt yourself, but there's also extra to that. You could seek other people out to harm you. I don't want to say too much, but that's also a level of Omega programming. If you're seeking other people out to harm you, and there are people that will harm you, especially a female, if you want that, there are people that will do that. So that is something that I realized that came from the Monarch programming is even into adulthood. How people remember when BDSM became a huge cultural phenomenon? That to me that came from Monarch programming. That's where that came from. And that reminds me of that, like people thinking that they want to be beaten and it's makes them feel so sexually excited. That totally reminds me of the playroom and that whole program, and it's disgusting. I don't want anything to do with that. So that was really interesting. That became a cultural phenomenon. Um, I wanted to talk about my survival alter because she is so interesting and I was terrified of her my whole life. So my whole life I felt like there was all these paranormal things happening to me. And I would always see this possessed little girl like in my dreams and my nightmares, sometimes in waking time, if I was meditating, I would see this like little possessed girl and she would have on this dirty nightgown and her hair would be in front of her face, just scary. And I never really got to see her eyes that much, and it was really difficult. She terrified me, and I always thought it was a ghost or a dark spirit or something. And throughout my hypnosis travels and learning about myself, I was able to speak with this particular alter, and she's a survival alter. It was the whole time that I was afraid of this thing, like whatever was always in the dark, it was me. Everything I was afraid of, it was me. It was because the survival altar pushes you towards your most base state of humanity. Because if the survival altar comes out, nothing else survives except for you, and it's only used in the most dire of circumstances. Like if you're in the worst position ever in a job, like you're at the level of where you're probably going to die, the survival altar will activate. And that's what can save your life if she comes out. So she doesn't come out very often. And I just got the tingle right now just talking about her because she probably heard me. But to me, she's terrifying. I was able to with hypnosis into going under trance, I was able to go into her world. And this is so crazy that these altars in your mind, it is so complex and it is so large and so huge within your mind. The altar can actually create worlds inside you. There are worlds inside you. Right now, everybody probably has worlds inside them. So this altar, she had created her own world inside me. And it looked like when I saw it, it did look like something a little kid would create, like it was she had this little dark cemetery, like a little scary cemetery, and then a little dark forest behind it. Like it was something a child created, back in the playroom. I created this and she thought it was the scariest place she could find. And she always, anytime I saw her, she was holding hands with this large, like antlered demonic type looking thing. She was always holding hands with it. So she is terrifying, and I can't, it's almost like you can't unleash her because then it's certain death, for anything but me. So I keep her under like a strict lock and key because that's only for if I'm under threat of death at any point. That's the only way she would come out. I had another altar, and this one was really interesting. Um, Her name was Judith, and I call her Judith of Mysteries because it's an occult altar. And this person was created during a ritual to Isis. So because of some of the companies that contracted with me, they wanted me to go further with occult training because, I'm just a kid. I don't know anything. So as I moved into adulthood, like later, like kind of like young adulthood, they had me work with this group of people, and I called them the witchery because that's what they called themselves, the witchery. And they they use some of the old books. They have these books that come down their family line, and that's their religion in a way. And so they're worshiping like these old Sumerian gods. They had them in their books and everything. It was so weird. And so they one of their main deities was Isis. So they wanted me to be reborn under her. And I thought at first, when they talk about ISIS, I'm like, that's something that's used in movies and cartoons, and they've created this like whole character out of her. So it didn't seem too scary to me. But they had this ritual where they wanted me to be draped in jewels, and I had to play the part, they said. So I had to be like dressed a certain way, draped in jewels. And then they had this little throne that they made you sit on, but it was like stone. It was made out of stone though. So I sat on it, and triggered a trance in me, and I went into trance, and Isis came. She knew she was ready. Almost when I sat in the chair, sometimes even when I'm doing before I get ready to do hypnosis, I can feel almost like things circling around my head. Like you can almost feel like things swimming and flying around your head. And that's kind of how I felt when I sat on this chair. Like I could almost feel her kind of like swimming around the ether, the air, trying to get ready to come inside me. So when I let her do that, she came through me, and they considered me to be reborn under her because I let her use my body. And she was speaking to them. And while she was speaking to them, to these witchery, I had the chance to go inside her mind and see what she was doing. And she showed me inside of her mind is a bright desert. That's what her mind is made of. That's the world she created in there. And she leaves that for her dedicated followers. So if somebody were to go up the ranks to her, like, I don't know, the most high devotee or whatever, they have a term for it. I can't remember the term. But if you make it to that level to where you've given that much of yourself to Isis, then she will allow you to do the final journey in a way with her. And that final journey is she wants you to walk in the desert until you die. And then she thinks that you can be joined together. And that's what she tells the followers. That's reserved for her most high devotees is the chance to become one with her by walking yourself to death in the desert. So that's kind of like what Judith of Mysteries was doing. So I was going to talk a little bit about what happened to me at age 13. So when I was about 13, they had a plan for me, and they wanted to change the direction of where I was going, and they sent me to some training for personality profiling. So I was with this kind of like very well-dressed gentleman as a chaperone. He didn't talk, I didn't talk. I was used to not talking. I know I wasn't supposed to ask questions, so I didn't. And I'm just a kid anyway, I don't know anything. And so I'm just with this guy, he gets me, and we go on a train. We take a train. So we're on this train, I'm chilling, he isn't saying too much. And we get off, and he just takes me to where I'm supposed to be. He leads me over to these people. And when I figure this out, I can see that we're on the moon. And I'm on level 4 of the underground base. And level 4 of the underground base is where they're doing their training. And I'm specifically have been targeted to do psionics training. So in this psionics lab, the woman she's the teacher, she's the instructor, she looks very young. I would expect to see somebody like in their 50s or 60s doing this class, but she looks like she's in her mid 20s. And from what I know, being on some of these planets, I can't always tell somebody's age, and I don't know why that is. sometimes they look like they're in their 20s and then they act like they're in their 50s or 60s. So it's a really weird thing. I don't know how that works or what happens to them, but she was very young and she did not want to work with me. Always gave me like this very stern attitude and she was very scary. I didn't want to work with her, but she was forced to work with me because they said that there was something in my file that said I came from special sector. So there was no option for her to say no. And she doesn't usually work with kids. They never have kids in their classes for Psionics. It's just not a thing they do. But something about me, I'm in special sector. So they got to work with me. So, and there was a couple other people in the classroom that had abilities that I didn't know what they could be used for, like talking to animals, and somebody expelled moisture from their fingers. I don't know if they were looking to just learn how to control it or not. And there was a lot of energy readers, um, telepaths, things like that. So I was the only one in there that was doing personality profiling. And I think this was a specialty of my instructor. And I always remember the one phrase, it is stuck in my mind. And she would get like right in my face when she would say it, and she would point her finger and she would say, one look and one word. And she would say, you have to be that fast. You have to be that fast. If you're going to go somewhere and know what the person is thinking, it would take one handshake, one look, one word. You have to know who they are. She would always say that and very sternly to make sure that I knew how important it was. And when she was teaching me, I always felt, very nervous and shy around her because she was so authoritative and assertive with me, even as a kid. But I appreciate it now because I think she was trying to keep me alive. She knew I was going to be going into very dangerous situations with whatever abilities I had, and she knew I had to be quick and I had to be very good at what I was doing in order to survive. So I can see that she, in a way, her assertiveness and her aggression was a way to keep me alive. So they kind of taught me about personality profiling and reading between the lines and reading body language very well. You wouldn't even believe how much things in your body is a tell. Any little way you move your head, your eyes, your mouth, any little sign, you don't even realize how much you tell people. They can figure out who you are, and that's how we run a lot of these espionage jobs, is by learning to read people and reading the rooms of people, especially when you're going into dangerous situations, because we weren't just doing basic level espionage. There were some very dangerous situations that we got into and other things. So that's how I got into that. And so the last altar I wanted to talk about is Rachel. And Rachel, her name actually, her full name was Rachel Meadows. And they kind of gave us these goofy, I don't know, these goofy names. Rachel Meadows, it was really interesting. But she was the profiler. And I had gone through my life, and I'd done a lot of beta tracking work, and they said that they were giving me a promotion for a job well done because of how well I had done at everything. And they had considered me a perfect asset because I didn't have any failures in my missions, and I followed all their directives to a T. I never asked questions, I never said anything. I just did what they wanted me to do and wanted to, I think I pretty much wanted to get through it and be done with it. But they gave me a promotion. So they sent me to Mars to do work on Mars. So it actually was a promotion. I didn't have to, do that same kind of like physical work anymore. I was be working in an office. So I got tasked to be someone in the human resources in the corporate sector, and I was working on Mercury Base, and Mercury Base is located in the South Canal region. I was working under a general named Asher. And so everybody that came in my office, I would spend about an hour with them and I would do like various like profiling assessments, And basically I was just making them talk for about an hour just so I can read every little part of them. And that's how I would make a determination and an assessment of what job I think they could do. And so a lot of people thought, in their minds, they're going to be doing these really amazing, like alien battles and things like that. And actually, I would be putting them in local jobs like plumbing, janitorial, mining, resources, sewage treatment, water treatment. We had all those. We even had an entertainment division. So we had all these different divisions that kept the base running. So a lot of the people that were volunteering, so back in the 70s, 80s, they were still doing trauma-based mind control, but in the later 90s and early 2000s, a lot of people were voluntary recruits. So that means a lot of the people that were coming to Mars were voluntary recruits from the Earth military. So they were saying that they were going overseas and they were actually going to Mars for a short time to do work there. And it was just basic, some would be military ground force work, the basic military. They weren't even fighting in big battles or anything like that. Just kind of like tactical division, things like that. So I was doing that for a long time, pretty much. until I started to have bleed through memories. I was on Mars just doing that work, and I hated it there. I don't know why anybody would want to be there. It was miserable being there, and especially I didn't talk to anybody because I was considered like working for the man. Nobody wanted to talk to me. Nobody wanted to be friends with me. I didn't have a lot of connections, and they didn't want me to talk to a lot of people because they thought it would reduce the effectiveness of my personality profiling ability if I was, interacting with people too much, so they didn't want me to even talk to people. So I felt like it was a really lonely existence. And if I would think about it, the way I acted and everything, I would say that I probably had depression, but we didn't have a word for depression on Mars. You weren't allowed to be depressed. So I didn't know what it was, and I was just, I don't know. I guess I thought maybe I was just losing it or something. And this is the time that when I was on Mars, I started to have a lot of weird thoughts and a lot of weird memories and bleed through experiences. And I didn't know what was wrong with me. It's like I could tell that there was something going on in my mind or in my body or spirit or something, and I just didn't know what it was. So I would go searching for things. Like I went through my the general's office once. That was a really big mistake. I'm not supposed to be doing that, but I felt something was pushing me, and I was looking through his things. And of course, I didn't find anything. They wouldn't keep anything like at face value right at the front. So I couldn't find anything, but I knew something was wrong. And I ended up getting demoted because I wasn't doing my job anymore with the same effectiveness that I had done it previously. And I ended up getting demoted, and I ended up doing a couple of different things. I did like liaison work for incoming ships. They were just cargo ships, and you were like doing paperwork, charting them, charting and signing off. And then I worked on a medical satellite station for a really short time. That's near Mars. And the satellite station is I was kind of like what you consider like a medical social worker, signing papers, because consent is very huge. No matter what people say, I was there, I saw it. For the faction I was in anyway. I was worked under Mars Defense Force, and I was under Division Mariner. So the specific faction and division I was in, consent was very huge. Everything was on paper. And I know because I'm the one that had people sign it. So I would go into the room if the person, because a lot of the soldiers were sent to this medical satellite station to get chemical augments or even physical augments, and they had to have signatures for it. And some of the people that were performing some of the experiments were not fully human, so they felt like if a human person came in their room and had them sign, it would make them a bit more comfortable than if somebody else would come. So they had me doing that. So I was doing a lot of that, especially. So I was going to say that when somebody leaves after their 20-year term of service, they get into retirement. And that's what we called it. When you are done with 20 years of service on Mars or in the secret space program, you would be retired. And at that time, from what I remember for me, you would be age regressed to the time they took you. But all I remember it being a chemical process. I don't remember a physical like thing. I don't remember having a clone or anything. I haven't found that yet. I don't see that. I saw it as a chemical process that was happening. But they ended up pushing me through to retirement after I finished my job. And I remember seeing on the forms that I signed that I was coded for re-entry, and that would be in the special sector for linguistics and retrieval. That meant that in the future, when I came back to Earth in my normal crappy life, that they could come and pick me up whenever they want and use me for any job. I literally signed for that, before I left. And you also sign before you leave, you sign to be controlled and monitored for the rest of your life by the aftercare program. So you're literally allowing all these handlers and any agency that controlled you to monitor you, control you for the rest of your life. You even sign before you leave, you sign these documents that say, upon reaching this agreement, your name, and then you would say you will comply with all standards and executions necessary and written by the whole of the law, and that any failure to comply with mission values will result in termination. And the termination doesn't mean being fired from your job. You literally sign to be killed if you're not following the status quo. And I know that because Mars Defense Force was very serious about making sure that their entire staff followed the status quo, because that was part of my job. If somebody came in the room to meet with me when I was doing profiling, and if I found something in them using my abilities that meant they would challenge the boss, I would have to alert the uppers about that. That means that they would challenge the status quo. So that was something that had to be monitored pretty regularly because they wanted to keep everything uniform on that particular base.
I have a quick question
Sure.
regarding the moon and
Mhm.
Mars. What was the purpose of taking you and others to these different locations off planet versus, say, keeping you here on planet Earth and training you in the same things?
From just the experience I had is that some of this training is specialized, and especially it was in the 70s and 80s. I think now they do a lot of it on Earth, and especially now that a lot of people are voluntary and it's becoming more, I don't know, known, So I think that they'd be okay with having it more on Earth, but back in those days, it was very secretive. So it was now it's if I say I was on Mars, there's going to be a few people that say, yes, I understand that. But back in the 70s and 80s, probably not. There probably wouldn't have been anybody that said they understood that.
And I know when you went to the
And
moon,
when they
all
took,
you
yeah,
remember is going on that train. How would they take you to Mars?
yes.
You remember that, or was that another sort of blackout moment where you don't have that recollection?
I don't remember how I got to Mars. I only remember how I got to the moon and was on a train. And being a kid, seemed like almost like a subway, like very fast moving kind of people mover type of train going very quickly. But I remember being on Mars because I worked as a liaison for the incoming ships. I saw ships coming in all the time. Oh, this is really funny that so when I got demoted, when I was working on the cargo ships, I before that, I had a hard time meeting people and, dating or whatever. So I met somebody on that cargo ship that we ended up getting in a relationship with. And he was somebody that brought in cargo from different areas. And one time he brought me, I thought it was really cool too. He brought me one of those little Debbie snack cakes called a raspberry zinger. And I thought it was like better than like a diamond ring because, in something in me recognized it as earth food, because earth food is contraband. You're not supposed to have that. I knew it was contraband and he had to like smuggle it. He smuggled a little Debbie snack cake all the way from Earth to give it to me. So that was really interesting that I got a gift like that. It was a raspberry zinger. And I'll always remember raspberry zinger. Anytime I see it at a grocery store, I'm like, Mars, right there. That came from Mars. That was a contraband on Mars. Any kind of little packaged snacks and things like that, because it does trigger memory. It does. And I see why they wouldn't allow it now is because it did trigger memories in me. It always did. Anything that I remembered from Earth, it would trigger a memory. Even something as small as a little snack cake triggered a memory in us. That's why they wouldn't allow it. And a lot of those things were contraband.
Wow. What's the time difference like with being on Mars? What is time like there
Mhm.
versus here?
I felt like I want to say it moved quicker, in
Mm.
my opinion. I felt like it moved really quickly. And I felt like people were there and gone so quickly too, because so many people were in and out in their retirement phases, because everybody was built around, short time frames. Nobody was there. I don't know a lot of people that were there longer than 20 years in one breath. You know, Even when I was on the moon, I remember seeing on a poster on the wall in the classroom that there was a general named General Land that was running the base at that time, and that he was going to be retired after 20 years of service. I saw a poster that they were having a banquet for him. So I thought that was interesting as a little kid that I just remembered seeing the banquet poster that he was going to be leaving. So I wonder if like 20 everybody it was kind of a known thing that 20. I don't remember if it was a known thing because I didn't really interact with a lot of people, but I don't remember a lot of people being stressed because we called it retirement. And if you were an officer, they would have a banquet for you anyways. And they would send kind of like a send off, like, oh, you've done really well. Here's your send off kind of thing. I didn't have a banquet or anything. I wasn't an officer, but I remember it was 20 years.
It's interesting hearing this and seeing like how far ahead these agendas get. We're now just today, in
Yeah.
2025, and I guess the last couple years too, you start hearing about, oh, we're going to go colonize people on Mars. We're going to build a new civilization there and like create a new habitat. And you look back all these
Yeah.
decades to where you're talking about and see that that's already been well established a long time ago. We're
Oh,
just now starting to like get that information trickled to us.
my thinking is that because of so many people talking about it, they can't exactly keep it a secret anymore. And I think that's their way of kind of moving people into the knowledge of Mars being colonized, being able to be colonized is by saying, look what we can do. Look at there's a savior taking us to Mars. They've been there for I don't know how many, they've been there forever and full running bases, you know, They, like I was going to explain, they even have an entertainment division. So on the weekends, they would have like, they would do things like that look like the UFC exhibitions. They'd call them exhibitions. They would have like a UFC type gladiator type thing. I did it one time, but I did a exhibition once because I felt like everybody hated me. So I felt like, okay, if I volunteer for an exhibition, maybe it'll get people to look at me a different way, you know? And plus they give out rewards. So, and you could pick whatever you wanted. And some of the other girls, they were picking goofy stuff like jewelry, and jewelry means nothing there. Like, what is a necklace going to do for you on Mars? So I picked food. I wanted extra food, and I got a really good meal. So that was my thing. So what we had to do was they wanted some of us women to dress up very pretty and feminine dresses and everything, and then sword fight to the death. And I don't think I remember losing a few times, but then I would be in my bed the next day with my food next to me. So they have some way to, I don't know if they must have some, and it's to the death. And most of the time it's a slit throat. So they have some way of fixing it. I don't know. The amount of technology they have on some of these bases is you would never even, you can't even imagine it. It's more advanced than you would see in like a movie and things like that. So I'm not surprised that I did that and then I was just in my room the next day. But I thought that it would make people look at me a little different. I don't think it worked, but it was worth a shot, to be one of the cool kids for a minute and just, do a little sword fighting, a little exhibition work.
Oh my gosh. And I mean, what you just said about the technology is another point with that, where we see just little bits of what's been around for a long time. They give us a new iPhone and we're like,
Yes.
ooh, this is amazing. When
Yeah,
it's probably
I
like
know.
80 years old that they've had that, and who knows like how far along it is now. And that's another commonality that a lot of MK Ultra and Monarch survivors have, is their access in these secret clandestine programs to the technology that the rest of the world probably
Yeah.
believes are quote unquote UFOs and UAPs, and the government tells us to look everywhere else except like to what they're doing, and that like this stuff actually
Yeah.
belongs to us.
And it's so normalized. We get so normalized to it when we're on the base. You're so normalized to seeing things. Like if I saw an alien on base, I wouldn't freak out. I don't know why. Like I don't even remember why I wouldn't freak out. I just know I wouldn't freak out. It's really interesting to see how normalized some of that stuff gets, especially like the profiling and, the exhibitions. It just becomes so normal. Nobody even questions it.
What age were you when you were doing the corporate espionage and some of those other programs that you mentioned your alters did? Was that whenever
Young
you were in?
adulthood.
Oh, wow.
Young adulthood. Yep. I believe it was 19 to 29. And then I think 29 to 39, I was doing profiling. You
Okay.
know what was really, I was going to talk about this one time that I think I was about 21 or 22 and I was on Mars and so they took me to this area and I was supposed to meet the ambassador for the antiquities division there. They have this huge antiquities division that runs a lot of the archaeology sites on Mars. And I didn't even know the guy's name. His last name was Schmiels, but a lot of people called him Smiles because that's what his name looked like it was that like, it would be pronounced Smiles, but his last name was Schmiels. And he was the ambassador for the antiquities division the time I was there, being a young person. And we kind of had a thing for a second. But the point is, they brought me there and they're on the ground in this particular place on Mars. And it wasn't near the base. I remember it was kind of far out and not close to where I was from. There was like these stone slabs, but they were flat. They just looked like slabs on the ground. Who would know, how could anybody know that they did anything? And so the Antiquities Division, they thought they wanted to find somebody that they thought they could turn this thing on. And they asked me to turn it on. And I'm like, I don't know what to do. So they had me, there's things in your files that they'll pull you for jobs and you don't even know what to do. And it's because there's something in your file that says you know what to do. I don't know what it is. I had no idea. And I was young. And so I stepped forward. And as soon as I stepped close to this, you could hear it. You could hear it start to work. And they all got excited and they were like, turn it on. And I'm like, I don't know how to turn it on. So it ended up happening that it turned on because something about my DNA and my blood turned it on. And it's a ancient gray technology. So I guess, in doing some of my explorations, I found out that I was a gray alien in the past life and one of their shamans. And in the ancient past, grays had religion and they felt very connected to that religion. And when they started to make a lot of progress in technology, they let go of that and then they lost their heart center, and they felt very disconnected. And now they're more machine than they are human. And a lot of their experimental tactics and, things that they're doing is they're trying to save their race. They said they're dying out because they've gotten so far away from their heart center, they lost it. They pretty much lost themselves, they said. So I thought that was interesting that they thought I could turn it on and I had no idea what to do, but all I had to do was step forward and it sensed my blood. It sensed what I could do. And I actually call this thing the God machine because these people have no idea what they had on their hands. It is a weapon. It looks just like a flat stone block, but it's a weapon. It's an ancient weapon. They could implode that entire planet. But this was years ago, so I'm sure once I turned it on and they saw that it could be turned on, they probably had somebody more advanced come there. I just showed them it could be turned on by someone. And it turns you like into a demigod. It like does something to your body. That machine, the sound, everything, you can hear it. It is so interesting to be near something so ancient, It was such an amazing experience to see it. And it was just a stone block. All I did was, all I could just reach down and touch it and feel like it was alive in a way. It was so interesting.
100%, yes. And before
Yeah,
we get into those, I wanted to just ask you one thing because I can
sure.
tell just by listening to you and by how aware you are and how much healing you've done as far as your system and how you've sort of been able to manage that cohesion inside. That's something a lot of survivors struggle with. And I wanted to see
Mhm.
how did you overcome some of those conflicts inside and that inner turmoil and sort of get everybody on the same page to go in the same direction. I love asking survivors this because it can offer like a lot of tools for, survivors struggling to manage that as they're waking up to what they went through.
For me, just being honest, it was meditation. It was
Hmm.
trance, it was hypnosis, it was spirit hosting, and ultimately it became into writing about myself freely and not sugarcoating anything, saying exactly what I found. And that gave me the most freedom to acknowledge all my darkness and all the dark parts that, whether they were placed in me or from me originally, that gave me the most freedom in my life is to see all that for what it was and to acknowledge it, take responsibility for it. And, I can become who I was meant to be by doing that.
That's amazing. And that's a really good tip. And after we talk about these two subjects too, I want to talk about your writing a little bit and how you've been able
Okay.
to do that in sort of a professional way that we can all indulge in it too. So let's dig into the
Okay.
Project Oblivion and the Olympia group, and I'll let you kind of lead that.
Sure. So, Project Oblivion, they're coming hard. They're coming hard for us. So, part of what I do when I go under spirit hosting, I'm trying to find information. I call it information for the all. And that's, I might break into a secret government base. I might break into there and look and steal their information. Um, or I'll break into a handler's apartment. I've done this before. I broke into my own handler's department with my spirit body, and I was standing behind him, and he knew he has abilities too. He could hear me in his head. I knew he knew I was there. I knew he was there. And what was really strange is when I walked up behind him in my spirit form. So when I'm doing remote viewing, I'm using astral travel and bilocation with it too, along with spirit hosting, all four of them together to do these processes. I was standing behind him and he could feel me. And I turned around and looked and I saw that his dead grandmother was in the same apartment as him. She was looking at him. And that's when I realized that I was using the ghost dimension to travel. So she saw me and I saw her. And he couldn't see either one of us, but I was behind him and he knew I was there. And I saw him typing on his computer and he's a remote handler. So there's an aftercare program. So once you're released from the secret space program or as an asset for any of these other programs, there's a particular program called the aftercare program that controls and monitors you for your life. And they make assessments and they do strategies to keep you controlled, which a lot of it is physical. And they use a couple of different machines like the Wasp or the Green Devil to keep you controlled with your health. They affect your relationships, your finances, your mental health, everything. They control everything by the stroke of a key on a computer. It's crazy. So I stood behind him And I knew he knew I was there, like I said, and I saw he was typing. He said the asset is combative and presenting with ill intentions. That's what he wrote. And he wanted me to see that because he wanted me to see that he's going to take measures against me. And he wrote that I was going to be experiencing spleen or tremors because of my what I was doing and trying to get information and looking in his computer and everything. And I did get a swollen spleen after that. That was crazy. That was a crazy validation. I did get a swollen spleen. And I even went to the doctor. I have documentation of it. They said it was a swollen spleen. So I was like, oh, nice try. So it was, there was more to it, but that was like the gist of it in terms of like the aftercare program and the handlers. We don't need to be afraid of them because they're these dorks sitting behind a chair on their computer in their own apartment. And they're trained too. And they came from MK Ultra True, which is weird. They came from MK Ultra. They have a handler division that they train these people specifically to be handlers. So that's where they get that ability from. And their expertise is in handling. So Project Oblivion is I infiltrated some handlers groups, and this is what they told me, and this is what they're saying is that we have gotten too far. We've gotten too believable. We're making too much headway and too much progress. They cannot allow it anymore. They've given the green light from the upper management of these private military groups that control this, and they implemented Project Oblivion, and they're going to be coming after us all. And one of the groups that they're targeting is podcasters because they feel like some podcasters are giving us survivors a platform to speak, and that's kind of made the movement grow even larger, and they can't have that. So I see that podcasters are going to be targeted as well by all different types of ways. It's all different types of things that they're going to be doing. So Project Oblivion, they're coming hard, and they said that they think that we're so weak that it'll be easy for them. They think that, they said, they literally told me, they said, we only have to send one person and you guys all fall to the ground like puppets without a string. They pretty much think we're a bunch of goofballs and that they said, everybody thinks you lie, everybody thinks you're fakers and LARPers. They said, you're never going to get anywhere. We're just going to come even harder. But if we're not getting anywhere, then why is such the push? Why do you need such a push to come after us if we're not doing anything special? That's the kind of information that they told me. And we can see it. It's going to cause division. They said they're coming to cause division between us because if they break us all up, it's going to be easier to make us all get knocked down. They said they're going to bring division. They're going to send agents, as trolls to, the main focus to stop us from talking about this. They'll send trolls. They'll send people to target channels and like get your channel taken down and get your strikes on your different channels and then send the trolls in the comments and, make them say certain things to make you feel like crap and make everybody, all the guests feel like crap. It's just a huge kind of wheel that they keep going and they think that they're going to be successful. They think it's there's no telling. They said we got it. You guys are pathetic and the whole movement is going to be destroyed.
And these
So
are
in their
people that
minds,
are
project
in MK Ultra that they're training to do this to people,
these are
exposing them.
so there's these private military groups control MKL for assets. Well, I consider them private military groups like Monarch, Monarch Solutions, Kruger Mercenary, people like that. There's a lot of private military groups and there are a lot of different factions fighting against each other and trying to maintain control over a lot of different things, especially financial. And they all do this in the name of conquest. They want it massive conquest, like friggin' Star Trek out there. They want conquest. So the aftercare program, and actually the aftercare program hides behind an insurance company. So you will never know. There's even one particular agency called the Princeton Agency. They're a handler program and they're monitoring us. So Project Oblivion is using an overarching agency called Roundtree, and they're using a software program called Spider Tracks. So they're also keeping track of all the connections we all make. So if I contact somebody else and we talk about MKUltra, they know that now. Then that person goes and talk to somebody else, they're tracking the entire network. So they have it all tracked with software. So they know when we're talking to each other, what we're saying, constantly being monitored in order to ensure that they can blow our movement up from the inside out. That's Project Oblivion.
Enjoy
They're
the
using
show,
their
you guys
handlers.
who are watching us. I hope you enjoy it.
Y- Yes, enjoy, enjoy.
It's interesting you say that because I've been sort of alluding to that also, that people now that we have technology, they don't have to train people to go physically gang stalk you or to,
No,
threaten you at home or at your work. They can go right online and go to your social media platforms and do so much damage to keeping you small.
easy,
Yeah, it's so easy. And they don't
easy.
have to show their face. It's not dangerous for them. And they can create anonymous accounts or aliases, and they can
So,
just keep
and they
doing
do
it.
it. We've all
Yeah.
had it. We've all had it happen. Anybody that's spoken has probably had somebody attack them and make a post about them. And this, you know what they like to do is they like to say stuff that they know will discredit you so much that you will just stop talking. Like call you a pedophile or call you something like they always say something like that because they know how can you fight that? Like, what are you going to say? They do it all the time. And I'm like, that is so damaging to the movement. And they know it. And they know it. That's why they do it because they know it's going to harm us if they're saying, well, this person is lying about this, it's so harmful. So there's got to be a big push somehow. I say that, and my father told me, he said, this is what my dad said. He said, you keep going. Don't stop talking because they will not win. He even said that to me. He said, you will not lose. He knows it. He said he sees it from where he's at. He said everybody's watching. He said you guys will not lose to keep going. And so that's how I get into project the Olympia group. So this is very important. And this was an experience I had. I've never had anything like this happen to me. And I know a lot of people talk about Montauk and like time travel and things like that. I've never had anything like that happen to me. So this particular experience, but like when I talked about before, when I do like spirit hosting and astral travel, you leave the limits of your physical body behind. And I know they came and took me to a private military base. And when I got to this base, it was very dreary. It almost looked like it was eternal night there, like very foggy. I don't know if it was fog or something. It just looked very dreary. As soon as I got there, I felt like this real negative, like energy all around me. And I wanted to ask what the base was called, and the general that met with me, I wanted to ask his name, but he said it's not ready to be known. That he's not going to tell us. It's not important. The base isn't ready to be known, and neither is his name ready to be known. But he did tell me that this was 12 years in the future, and he said he'd been waiting a long time for me to be prepared to be able to take this message back. And he said they've been waiting a long time for this. So about 12 to 15 years in the future, there's a revolution on the horizon. And he said, we need to take the world back from everything that's happened from today until like 12 to 15 years in the future. He said, it's bad. He said, it doesn't look good at all. And he said, they're in a really bad situation right now in the future. So he's sending this information back to us in the disclosure movement to get moving on it. And what he was saying is that because of all the technology in the future, they're struggling and that they need the Olympia group to be there in order to win the war and turn the tides for the revolution, for us, for the people. And he said that the Olympia group right now, they're children. They're about I think 9 or 10 years old, all the way up until 19. So a small group. But he said they all came together. They fell here and volunteered to help and, win the war. And this is weird because these are computer kids. These are hackers. And he said, because there's so much technology in the future, the war is fought with technology. And he said, if we don't have these people, that we're not going to win. He said, we need these kids. And he said, they're amazing and their minds are like computers. And his main message was for everyone, and especially the disclosure community. And he said, build the network here, maintain the network, protect the Olympia group. He said, that's everything we need to do. And it's very important. And I told him, I was like, what can I do? I said, I'm just a girl, a little girl. What can I do? I can't be in charge of this. And he's like, just go back and tell everyone what I said. Build the network, maintain the network, protect the Olympia group. So this Olympia group, these kids, they're going to be targeted. If they know who they are already, they are trying to show me pictures of the kids. And I'm like, I can't maintain it in my brain all at one time. They said that they have already identified who they are because they have a lot of ways to tell who they are. And they said they know who they are. They're going to be targeted. They even told me that one of the girls, he showed me that one of the little girls, she's like 16 or 15, they're going to try to make her into a drug addict. So she's thrown off her mission. So it's so important. And I think it's an important message to protect children that we haven't really been able to say that before because so fo disclosure community, we've been so focused on ourselves and getting our stories out and stuff. And I'm like, this is more important than my story. This is protect children, and we're gonna lose our entire world. We won't have a chance. And that came straight from a general. A general from the future said this. He told us to do this, the disclosure community, build this network and protect the children.
And so really, it's almost like a group of souls decided to come here at the same time, is what you're saying, for this mission. They made this conscious choice before they were actually born physically
Yes.
into this world. They did that in sort of that in between.
Yeah, and they're a special group and they're volunteers. He said they're volunteers. They came here to volunteer to help the world. And they're all kids right now. So, they're on their computers playing video games and they don't know who they are. So, we were kind of talking like, well, how do we what do we do for them? And he said, you're doing exactly what you need to do now is to tell people about it by getting on, especially when we're doing shows and things like that, because these kids are always on YouTube, TikTok, and all that. He said, if any seeds need to be planted, they'll find it by just seeing a video one time. Maybe it'll trigger something in them that they'll know who they are and what they need to do and, keeping themselves safe and being able to be part of this revolution to take our world back. And even my father said, you guys are going to win. You're going to take the world back. It's so important. Even though it looked very bleak in the future, there was a spirit guide that came through and we kind of asked her, what are the odds of this future? She said 38%. There's a 38% the future does look like what he's showing us. So, I mean, there's a good chance that it won't happen, but 38% is still a pretty large number where he's saying, right now, your main task is to build that network, maintain it, and protect the Olympia group.
And regardless, that should be all of our goal, whether it's these
Yes,
children or any children, is we need to make the world, period, a better place for the children of the future because what we're handing them right now is not looking good, you know? And so
yes,
we have to step up and like reprioritize that. It's amazing how far they've pulled us through all these different agendas to focus on other things as a priority instead of children. It's like children are just like an afterthought now. And it's like we're trying to undo
yes,
like decades and decades and generations of programming on society to be like, no, like it's the children. They need to be at the top. Everything else is below that. Like what we need to do is protect them to make the world better for them and to come together to help create the revolution that they can follow through on, as a younger
yeah.
generation, that they can.
That's what he said. That's what the general said is that, this is not the time for us, us whistleblowers and things. This is not our time. We're setting the stage for them to continue the work. They're going to be the real warriors, and we're setting the stage for them. So all this we're doing is so important to build that, basic network for them to take over. So we really are kind of setting the stage for them. And I think it's so important, such an important message, whether it came from a future general or not. It's one of the most important messages that's ever come through me. And I always think it's so important to tell people, I don't think it's anything's wrong with telling people to protect children. And that's what they're saying.
And I love that that's motivated you along with the words from your father after he passed, and how you've so bravely stepped up to do this mission, post what you went through as a child, to put all the stress on yourself to come forward as a public whistleblower and to create all this content, and I love that you found your voice and you found so many creative ways to get these messages out. And I'd like to talk about that a little bit. You have
Yeah.
two amazing books. You're working on a third.
Yes.
And I'd
Yes.
love for you to talk about these because these are just filled with so much of what we talked about today, plus so much more. But you
Yes.
have a lot of information in here, and I'd love for you to talk about both of them.
Yes. Yeah. And, the first one, Sex Space and Mind Control, it was so much my origin story. And I can see, like, if I go back and look at that, I can see the progression from that one to the second book, even to now that I'm writing. It was such a progression to see where my head was at during that time. And Purgatory is actually probably my favorite. And I went so far with that book. I literally traveled to the outer realms. I saw the outer realms. And when I say that, I went to a place that's at the edge of the universe and I saw that there was a door there and I couldn't it's like the door is leading to the unimaginable. So I definitely didn't want to pass that. I'm not ready to, 'cause I'm still a human. But it shows you what is possible, with just being us. it always amazes me that I was able to do all that and I can put it into words and tell people about it. It always amazes me.
And these are, I'm going to bring up some of your social media sites, but these can be
Yes.
found on Amazon, which is really
Yes.
exciting. And they're paperback, and then you can also do the Kindle version. Is that correct?
Yes, Kindle and audiobook. And also for anybody, I know my main focus is to get the information out. So if anybody doesn't consider themselves a reader, you can find the other most of the information. I also put it in video format on TikTok. I do a lot about it on Instagram, sometimes Twitter X, things like that. So the information is all out there if you want to find it. You know, if especially if you're not a reader, you can go and watch some of the videos and it still has that. And I also have two blogs on Medium and Substack, where I also do articles every week about MK Ultra and the experiences and different spiritual experiences that I'm having. So it's always something different and new and keeps it moving and keeps the conversation going.
And I really encourage you guys to support Olivia on these different platforms and to get her books. I have so many of you that always ask, what can I do to help? And I know it's like Olivia said earlier, when faced with sort of coming back here and talking to these different entities and people who have who she's hosted, where she's just been like, I'm just a girl, like what can I do? Like I'm not important, I'm just one person. Well, we're all really important, and I think we've had our power just stripped away from us in so many ways, and been made to think that we are nobody and that we can't do anything. One of the best things that we can do is support those on the front lines that are bravely coming forward, because they inspire others to do it. And it's just like Olivia said, the more of us that do come together and unite over this, find the courage to share our voices and our stories, to put information together, to encourage people to protect the next generations, and to sort of reprioritize all the screwed up things that have been inverted in society. Um, if we can do that and support whistleblowers and survivors, then more are going to come forward, and we're going to accomplish that a lot quicker, and in a more uniformed way. I always say the only thing the enemy does better than us is organize. Like they don't have more, there's not more of them than us. They're not good people. Like they're not doing good things. They're not telling the truth. Like everything that they do is built on things that can just be torn out right underneath them so easily. Like in a day, if we were to all come together and like tear this down, we could do it right now. And it would be so easy for all of us, but they've divided us and fractured us as a society so much that we haven't been able to accomplish that. We're too busy arguing with each other, and I think
Exactly.
it's like one of the best things I feel that we can do to unify is to support, to come together. If you see Olivia posting her content on Substack or on TikTok or on her Twitter. Share it. Like it's free, it's easy, and it's something that you can do to bring it to the attention and to the forefront for other people to see it. We don't even have to go and create content anymore if we're afraid to do it or afraid to get things wrong or don't feel like we're educated enough. We have books that we can give to as gifts now. Like years and decades ago, you talk to survivors who were whistleblowing decades ago, books didn't exist on this. Like that was like impossible to get a book published about anything on this topic. It's a miracle that like we've gotten this far to where survivors can now post content publicly and it's accepted on Twitter, that they can have articles that we can pass around and share, that they're publishing books on mainstream websites like Amazon that we can get shipped to our house in a day. Like it's absolutely incredible time, and it's something so easy that we can do to help move this movement and this revolution forward quicker.
Yep. Olivia
Yeah.
James, Gray Mouse, that pretty much anywhere you can get a connection to me. And I wanted to say that before we close out, that the handlers always try to make fun of me and call me like a little mouse and things like that because of the way they mind controlled me to be very quiet and small and consider myself as small. But I've taken that gray mouse word and transformed it into like a word of power for myself and taken on that persona instead of making it seem like them, trying to make fun of me and call me something very small and insignificant, like a little mouse, but I've taken it and made it into a word of power for myself.
That is absolutely incredible. And I love that you use that. I remember you saying in another interview, and maybe we can talk about it a little bit more next time that you come on about the gray mouse and, sort of what that entailed a little bit deeper. But I love that you've
Yes.
even created an online identity around that and like really taken that power back as like something that you were recognized for, something that was that you were that was like special to you. your skills that you had that were used and the things that you overcame. I love that that's something now that you can share, and it's not attached to that fear. It's not attached to the different negative emotions and the scaredness that you had, and you've like made this your own thing, and I think it's so badass and cool.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you for having me today.
You're absolutely welcome. And so for everybody listening, I know we went over a bunch of sites. Olivia James, Gray Mouse, like she said, you can just type into anything and it's going to populate. But to make it easy for you guys, I'll actually link all of these links in the show notes. You guys can just go click and it'll take you right there. She does a really great job outlining a lot of really complex things in a very simplistic and palatable way. And it's a really great thing, like I said, that we have access to this now and that there's creators out there taking the time to do this for us. So, Olivia, it's really an honor to have you on. I'm really looking forward to sharing another conversation with you. Is
Yeah,
there
me
anything?
too. Yeah, thank you.
You're welcome. Is there anything that you wanted to close on?
No, just for people to remember the messages from the general and from my father. We can burn the system down. We're here tasked to build a network, and we got to maintain this network for the future generation.
Amen. Let's burn this down, you guys. So I'll have all of Olivia's information in the show notes. I'll have all mine too. Please follow us across all platforms, share our content, get the word out. And we couldn't do this without you guys. So thank you so much for listening. Bless you all, and we will see you next time.